Today, we're going to take a look at some of the self-service administrative features of MeldRx. This information may be especially useful for customers who use MeldRx for HTI-1 or Cures Act compliance. Over the past few months, we've been gathering feedback and working on loads of enhancements and improvements that give customers unprecedented control over the management of their organization. If you haven't visited MeldRx in a while, you may notice that things look a little different. We've been working on a new interface optimized to help EHRs and enterprise organizations get a more complete picture of their workspaces, apps, and usage. One feature that we are very excited about is the ability for our customers to create and manage their own workspaces. Previously, this was handled through support requests, but now it can be done self-service entirely through app.meldrx.com. Let's walk through creating a workspace together. Once I'm logged in, I want to make sure that I'm on the Workspaces tab and click on Create Workspace. You'll see two different types of workspaces. For HTI-1, typically you'd be choosing Standalone Workspace. In the Workspace Details section, you'll need to give your workspace a name. For the Workspace Identifier, you'll want to choose something that's recognizable by your organization. In the past, we've recommended people use something like a tax identification number, but you can choose any value here that you want. The Workspace URL slug is going to be how the API appears. So if I start typing a value, it'll actually show me what it's going to look like. And it shows me that this one is available, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. In the next section, if you want to invite a practice administrator to the workspace, you can do that here. I'm going to go ahead and skip this. Generally, we recommend that people keep the Fire Profile validation enabled. And finally, I'm going to select a system app that will have access to this workspace. And then hit Create Workspace. Now that I have a new workspace, I'm going to click Go to Workspace, and I'm taken to my workspace where I can do all sorts of things. We're going to start in the Settings menu under General. For the general settings, I have the ability to edit my workspace name. This is just going to be what it looks like for me internally in the system. If I'm, for example, on the Workspaces tab, I can see Healthcare Associates of Colorado. If I change this to Healthcare Associates of Colorado 2, you'll see that that changes here. This is completely for you. Other things that I can modify: if I'm sending patients invites to be able to view their medical records, I can change the way that the email looks here. I can change the subject, the title, the body, etc. And when I'm ready, I'll hit save. From here, there's a lot of other things that we can do. We'll start on the next one down, System Apps. When I created my workspace, I selected a system app that has permissions to interact with this workspace. If I had another system app, I could click Add System App and add it here. I've only got the one, so I'm not going to make any changes. If you need to remove it or change the role, you can just click the Remove button and then add it again with the permissions that you want. For providers and directory, we're going to dig deeper into those in just a minute. For users, this is the workspace users. So this would be any of the people typically at the practice that would have access to view this data. For EHRs that are managing multiple practices, you may only want to be giving access to somebody based on a location or a practice, etc. For example, if you have an office staff member who's in charge of sending patient invites, you may want to come to the Users tab and add them here. Or if you put in the details for a practice administrator during the workspace creation, they would show up here. Now, there's a lot of other things that you can do as an administrator of a workspace that we're not going to cover today. Things such as adding patients or importing new data, adding or administering fire groups, accepting requests from patients to receive medical records that they may have sent you, and managing some of the DSI or Decision Support Intervention features related to the B11 regulation. There's a few other things you can do too, but we're going to save that for another time. Next up, we're going to talk about the MeldRx Directory. The MeldRx Directory is a listing of all of the workspaces and providers who are licensed for HTI-1 compliance. If I want to quickly view the directory, I can click right here under Directory, and it will load in a new tab. Some fun facts about the MeldRx Directory: I can search for any workspace. I can search by name if I wanted to say associates, for example. It's going to come back with everything that has the word associates. If I want to find a provider that has the last name Smith and I click in one of them, I can see that there is probably somewhere in this list here, there is a provider whose last name is Smith. There it is, Taylor Smith. If I go back, if I want to search by location, I can do that as well. For example, I'll just type in New York. And then I can see that all of these have New York in the title, but if I click on one of these, I can also see the address for the location, which is also in New York. This directory is public. It can be consumed programmatically by anyone too. If I click on this View as Fire bundle, this big block of JSON may look pretty dense, but for apps like Common Health on Android or healthit.gov's Lantern project, anything that wants to can consume this directory and its data. Ideally, you want to make your information in the directory as user-friendly as possible. And when I say user-friendly, as a patient, I should be able to find my provider as easy as possible with very little effort. If I open my app and I search for my provider and I can't find it, it's probably not going to look good for the organization. So it's in your best interest to keep the directory as up-to-date as possible with the correct data so that patients can find you. Now that we've talked about the directory, let's take a look at setting up the directory listings. If I go back to my MeldRx workspace, and this time I'm going to click on Directory, I have the ability to add a directory listing. I'm going to click this button. The display name is how it is going to appear in the directory. My workspace name is Healthcare Associates of Colorado. I'm just going to type that. I'll type the address, and the city, state, and zip code, and save. Let's say that I made a mistake. I can click on Edit and make the correction. You may also need to do this if a practice moves or changes locations, or if you need multiple directory entries, you can add that here too. Let's say that my Healthcare Associates of Colorado has 2 locations. One is north, one is south. Now, if I have 2 locations, I probably want to go back and edit the original one so that it shows up as north. That way people don't get too confused. If I go look in the directory, I'm on a local instance right now, so it's not going to be the full directory. I can see that I have 2 listings, a north and a south. If I click into them, I can see that the north one is located in 80924. And if I go back and look at south, it's in the 80908 zip code. So this looks pretty good to me. But I don't have any providers added yet. Let's take a look at how that's done. Back in MeldRx, there's another tab that says Providers. If you haven't added your directory listings yet, you would see an error. For example, if I switch over to another, I'm going to go to this Westview Medical Practitioners. I don't have any directory listings for this workspace yet. I would need to add those first before I can add the providers. Moving back, click Add Providers. Adding providers has lots of benefits for you. One of which is that your providers are able to publicly demonstrate their commitment to interoperability by getting listed in the directory. We've gotten lots of positive feedback about this from both our patients and providers, and we're super excited to make this available for our HTI-1 customers. For customers who are on an NPI licensing model, adding NPIs is also required to be able to upload patient data. If you attempt to upload patient records for a provider that isn't listed here, the upload will fail until you add the provider, so you'll want to make sure that it's as up-to-date as possible. Now, there's a few ways that you can add providers. The first of which is you can just type in the NPI manually. Most of the time, that's not a great idea unless you just happen to know an NPI by heart. We also allow the bulk entry of NPIs. Typically, people would have them in a spreadsheet of some sort. You can just copy it directly out of Excel and paste it in here. It should have a space between the different entries. You can set an activation date. It defaults to today's date, but if you want to use this field for your own purposes, it's completely up to you. It's an internal field only, and if you don't know it, you can just keep it as today's date. If you have multiple locations, you can select which locations the providers are practicing at. If you only have one directory entry location set up, this field will not appear. I'm going to choose Healthcare Associates of Colorado North, and then let's try and click Add Providers. It fails. It tells me that this NPI right here, this 19029142221 is invalid. This is a pretty common thing to happen. Keeping track of all the MPIs for various organizations can be quite the task. One thing that you can do though is if you want to take that MPI and paste it into the NPES MPI registry, you can validate and see what's going on. This one says no matching records found. Maybe I look it up and, oh, well, I actually had a number wrong. It should be this 9 here. And I search for it and I can see that this Dr. Mia shows up. So that's probably the right MPI. Let's go back and we'll remove that one. All right, now let's try it again. Okay, that worked this time. I can see that I have these 5 providers. These are all valid. I didn't have to provide the name because the provider's name came from the MPES registry when we put those in. Let's say that you come back on another day and you want to add more MPIs. You can do that here just by pasting them in. If a provider is already in the list, it's going to throw an error. It's going to tell you that it already exists, so don't try to add them multiple times. Also, if the provider's name from MPES isn't how you want it to appear, you can click on Edit and then edit the provider's name manually. If they switch locations, you can fix the location as well. Finally, if a provider leaves a practice, you'll want to deactivate them. Let's say Dr. Tupman has left this practice. I'm going to click on Deactivate and deactivate MPI. If I go look in the directory and click on the North location, I can see that I have 4 providers now instead of the 5. I see Desi, Mary Carmen, Mitch, and Sarah, but no Jeffrey. If that was a mistake, I can always come back and reactivate Jeffrey, refresh, and he'll show up. Keep in mind, if I do deactivate a provider, they will stay in the system here so you can see them for a little while, but they'll be removed in the next billing cycle. And that's it for self-service administration. If you found this content helpful, consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or join our community on Discord for a more interactive experience. Check out the links in the video description for more details. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.